The void of space stretched endlessly in all the Murcianons, punctuated only by the distant glow of stars and the occasional flash of warship engines. In this vast galactic arena, civilizations had risen and fallen like waves against an infinite shore, each leaving their mark on the cosmic tapestry. Among them, humanity had carved out its own precarious niche, fighting tooth and nail for every resource, every trade route, every fragment of territory they could claim. Commander Marcus Reed stood at the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching the swirling nebula that marked the edge of the restricted zone. At 29, he was young for a ship commander, but his tactical brilliance and unwavering determination had earned him rapid promotions through the ranks of the United Earth Fleet. His dark hair was already showing streaks of premature gray, a testament to the weight of command he carried on his shoulders. The restricted zone had been established by the Galactic Accords 50 years ago, a buffer between the expanding human territories and the domain of the Zephyrian Empire. No ship from either side was supposed to cross that invisible line without explicit permission from both governments. It was a barrier that had maintained an uneasy peace for half a century. But peace, Marcus had learned, was often just war waiting for the right moment to begin. "Commander," called out Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the navigation station, her voice cutting through the bridge's ambient hum. "We're receiving final orders from Fleet Command." Marcus turned from the viewport, his gray eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Put it through, Lieutenant." Admiral Patricia Voss's stern face appeared on the main screen, her silver hair pulled back in the regulation military bun that had become her trademark. "Commander Reed, your mission parameters are as follows. Intelligence suggests the Zephyrians are massing forces beyond the restricted zone. Your task is to conduct reconnaissance along our side of the border and report any unusual activity. Under no circumstances are you to cross into Zephyrian space. Is that understood?" "Perfectly clear, Admiral," Marcus replied, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. "Good. Remember, Commander, we're trying to avoid war, not start one. The political situation is delicate enough without any creative interpretations of orders." The Admiral's eyes narrowed slightly. "The Defiance is one of our most advanced ships, and you're responsible for 350 souls aboard her. Don't let that tactical brilliance of yours overshadow your judgment." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in relative silence, save for the constant hum of the ship's systems. Marcus stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to face his crew. The bridge was a symphony of controlled activity. Officers manning their stations, holographic displays showing ship status, and the faint vibration of the massive fusion engines that propelled them through space. "Helm set course for Sector 7 Alpha," Marcus ordered. "Take us to the border." As the Defiance moved deeper into space, Marcus found himself thinking about the weight of command. Every decision he made could mean life or death. For his crew, could tip the balance between peace and war. But sometimes he reflected peace came at too high a price. 3 days into their patrol, everything changed. Lieutenant Kim's voice carried a note of alarm as she called out from her station. "Commander, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures on the other side of the border. Configuration suggests Zephyrian warships." Marcus moved quickly to the tactical display, where holographic representations of ships appeared like deadly fireflies in the darkness. Chief Tactical Officer David Foster, a grizzled veteran with 20 years of service, was already analyzing the data. "Sir, I count at least 12 vessels," Foster reported. 3 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and what looks like? God almighty, that's a dreadnought." The bridge fell silent. A Zephyrian dreadnought was a ship of nightmares, capable of reducing an entire fleet to cosmic dust. Marcus studied the formation, his mind racing through possibilities and implications. "They're not just patrolling," he murmured. "That's an invasion fleet." Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez, his second in command, appeared at his shoulder. "Sir, we should report this immediately. Fleet Command needs to know." Marcus nodded, but something nagged at him. "Kim, Can you get a closer look at their formation? I need to know their exact intentions. Sir, to get a clear tactical assessment, we'd need to get closer, Kim replied hesitantly. Much closer, and that would mean… Crossing the line, Marcus finished. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew the regulations knew the weight of the Galactic Accords, but they also knew that if the Zephyrians were preparing for war, humanity needed every advantage they could get. Marcus made his decision in a heartbeat. Plot a course into the restricted zone. We go in fast, get our intel, and get out. Sir, Vasquez protested. The Admiral's orders were explicit. We're not to cross the border under any circumstances. Marcus turned to face her, his jaw set in determination. Commander, if that fleet attacks one of our colonies while we're sitting here following protocol, how many innocent people will die? Sometimes you have to go too far to protect what matters. The crossing was initially uneventful. The Defiance slipped through the invisible boundary like a shadow. Her stealth systems engaged to minimize their sensor signature. For 30 minutes, they gathered intelligence on the Zephyrian formation. Marcus pushing them deeper into enemy space to get better readings. That's when the alarms started blaring. Multiple contacts, Foster shouted over the cacophony. They've detected a Zephyrian patrol craft closing fast. The main screen filled with the sleek predatory shapes of Zephyrian interceptors, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian in the starlight. Unlike human ships, with their utilitarian design and visible weapon mounts, Zephyrian vessels were works of art. Beautiful, deadly, and utterly alien. Evasive maneuvers, Marcus barked. Get us out of here. The Defiance banked hard to starboard her inertial dampeners, struggling to compensate for the sudden acceleration. Space around them erupted in brilliant flashes as Zephyrian plasma bolts sliced through the void where they had been moments before. But Marcus had underestimated the enemy response. As they raced toward the border, more ships appeared on their sensors. Not just patrol craft, but full warships moving to intercept them. Sir, they're hurting us, Kim reported, her voice tense. Away from the border. Marcus realized with growing horror that his reconnaissance mission had become something far worse. The Zephyrians weren't just trying to capture them. They were using the Defiance's intrusion as justification for something much larger. Incoming transmission. Communications Officer Roberts announced, "It's from the Zephyrian fleet." On screen, the face that appeared was distinctly alien. Elongated features, skin with a subtle blue tint, and eyes that seemed to hold depths of ancient wisdom. This was Admiral Thoros, architect of the Zephyrian Empire's greatest military victories, Human Commander. Thoros spoke, his voice carrying an accent that seemed to flow like water. You have violated the sacred boundaries established by the Galactic Accords. This act of war will not go unanswered. Marcus stepped forward, his hands clenched at his sides. Admiral Thoros, we were conducting standard reconnaissance. Our intrusion was brief and non-aggressive. Non-aggressive. Thoros laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. You penetrated 20,000 kilometers into our sovereign space with a warship. By our laws, this is sufficient cause for immediate retaliation against your entire fleet. The transmission ended, and Marcus felt the weight of his decision crushing down on him. He had not just endangered his ship and crew. He had given the Zephyrians exactly what they needed to justify a war they had apparently been planning all along. Sir, Foster called out, the entire Zephyrian fleet is moving. They're heading for the border. Marcus watched in horror as the holographic display showed the enemy ships accelerating toward human space. The dreadnought's massive bulk was already casting sensor shadows across nearby star systems. All stop, he ordered quietly. Sir, Vasquez questioned. All stop, Marcus repeated louder. We're not running anymore. The bridge crew stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Lieutenant Kim was the first to speak. Commander, with respect, we can't fight that fleet. We'll be vaporized. Marcus looked around at his crew. Young faces, old faces, all looking to him for answers he didn't have. These people had followed him across the galaxy, trusted him with their lives, and now his arrogance had doomed them all. "I know we can't win," he said finally, "but maybe we can slow them down. Give Fleet Command time to respond." He paused, the weight of command settling even heavier on his shoulders. "I put us in this position. I won't run from the consequences." What followed was one of the most desperate battles in human military history. The Defiance, alone against impossible odds, fought like a cornered wolf. Her advanced weapons systems carved deadly paths through space, her shields flaring with each enemy hit. Marcus watched his crew work with desperate efficiency, each knowing they might not see another sunset. Chief Foster coordinated their defensive fire with the precision of a master conductor, while Kim pushed the ship's engines beyond their safety limits to keep them mobile. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes worked frantically in sickbay as casualties mounted, and Engineer Thomas Park performed miracles in the engine room to keep their damaged systems running. For 2 hours they held the line. The Defiance was battered her hull, scarred by plasma burns and missile impacts, but she still fought. Marcus found himself thinking of Earth of blue skies and green fields that seemed impossibly far away now. He thought of the academy where they had taught him about duty and honor and the cost of command. They had never prepared him for this. "Sir," Vasquez reported, her voice hoarse from shouting orders. "Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. We've lost main engines and auxiliary power to sections 4 and 5. The ship shuddered under another barrage and sparks flew from overloaded consoles. Through the smoke and chaos, Marcus saw something on the tactical display that made his heart skip. "Foster, are those?" "Yes, sir." The tactical officer grinned through his exhaustion. "Human ships, sir. The rest of the Third Fleet." Admiral Voss had not abandoned them after all. Through the static-filled communications, Marcus heard her voice cutting through the noise of battle. "All ships, this is Admiral Voss. Engage the enemy, I repeat, all ships engage. Protect the Defiance." What followed was a running battle that would be studied in military academies for generations. The human fleet, outgunned but not outfought, held the Zephyrian advance at the border. Ships traded devastating broadsides across the void, and space itself seemed to burn with the fury of their conflict. But the cost was enormous. Good ships and good people died that day because of Marcus's decision to cross the line. When the smoke finally cleared, both fleets had withdrawn to lick their wounds. The Zephyrians had been stopped, but the price had been paid in blood and titanium. The Defiance, barely spaceworthy, was towed back to port by a fleet tender. The aftermath was swift and severe. Marcus found himself standing in Admiral Voss's office on Ceres Station, still in his battle-damaged uniform. His left arm was in a sling, and a bandage covered a plasma burn on his forehead. 3 ships lost, the Admiral said without preamble. 47 dead, over 200 wounded. All because you couldn't follow orders. Marcus stood at attention, staring at a point somewhere over her shoulder. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Commander?" He looked her in the eye, then seeing anger, but also understanding in her weathered face. "I thought I could prevent a war, Admiral. Instead, I started one." The war was inevitable, Reed. Intelligence suggests the Zephyrians were looking for any excuse to attack. You just handed it to them on a silver platter. She sighed heavily. "The politicians are furious the media is calling you either a war criminal or a hero. Depending on the outlet, and half the fleet wants your head, while the other half wants to give you a medal." Marcus felt hollow inside. "What's my fate, Admiral?" "Officially, you're being reassigned to a desk job at Fleet Headquarters. Your combat command is suspended, pending a full investigation." She paused, then added more quietly, "Unofficially, that intelligence you gathered before everything went sideways may have saved millions of lives. We knew exactly what we were facing because of your mission." 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of a transport ship, watching the stars streak past at warp speed. He was being transferred to a small outpost on the edge of human space, where he would spend the next few years analyzing patrol reports and filing requisitions for spare parts. The war with the Zephyrians continued, though it had settled into a stalemate of skirmishes and political maneuvering. The full invasion never came, partly because humanity was prepared for it, and partly because the Zephyrians had learned to respect human resolve. Lieutenant Kim, who had volunteered to transfer with him, found him at the viewport. She was one of 12 crew members from the Defiance, who had requested reassignment to follow their disgraced captain. "Regrets, sir?" she asked quietly. Marcus considered the question for a long moment. "Every decision costs something, Kim. The question is whether what you gain is worth the price you pay." He thought about his crew scattered now to other ships and assignments. Most had welcomed him as a hero, despite everything. The man who had stood against impossible odds and held the line until help arrived. Foster had been promoted and given his own ship. Dr. Hayes had returned to Earth to teach at Starfleet Medical. Park had joined a research station studying alien technologies. They had survived most of them, but Marcus knew he would carry the weight of those who didn't for the rest of his life. "Sometimes going too far is the only way to find out where the line should have been drawn," he said finally. "The question is whether you're willing to accept the consequences." The stars continued their ancient dance outside the viewport, indifferent to human ambition or alien empire. In the vast scope of the galaxy, their war was just another small conflict, a tiny ripple in the cosmic pond. But for the people caught in its wake, every decision measured, every life lost was irreplaceable. Marcus Reed had learned that command meant more than tactical brilliance or personal courage. It meant understanding that every choice has consequences, and that sometimes the price of action is steeper than the cost of inaction. As his transport ship carried him toward his new assignment, he made himself a promise. He would learn from his mistakes, grow from his failures, and somehow find a way to make amends for the lives his decisions had cost. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and terrors beyond imagining. Somewhere out there among the stars, new adventures awaited. New challenges, new opportunities to prove himself worthy of the trust others placed in him. But for now, Marcus was content to watch the stars and remember that every leader must face the consequences of going too far. The trick was learning to live with them, and to ensure that next time, if there was a next time, the price would not be quite so steep. In the end, the story of the Defiance became legend. Cadets at the Academy studied the Battle of the Restricted Zone as an example of tactical innovation under desperate circumstances, but they also learned about the importance of following orders, understanding consequences, and the true instinct of command. Years later, when Marcus finally returned to active duty, he carried with him lessons forged in the fire of battle and tempered by the burden of responsibility. He had gone too far, yes, but in doing so, he had learned exactly where the boundaries truly lay. And sometimes in the quiet moments between stars, that knowledge made all the difference.